Hey guys, it's Bromley. Today I am going to cover some of my life lessons that I have picked up as a lifter over the years, specifically covering the things I wish I knew when I started, when I was a newbie, when I was a beginner, when I had no idea what the hell I was doing. If I could go back in time and educate young Bromley with some of the crucial wisdom that is required to survive as a lifter and actually be successful and stay in one piece, these are the things that I wish I knew back then. And I'm actually going to cover a little bit because it does turn out that I did get some things right. The things that I actually did start out on the right foot with. And I'm going to cover those and how those have helped me. Quick reminder, guys, base strength is now $9.99. You can get it on the Amazon store or directly from my store, EmpireBarbellStore.com. Also, go ahead and check out my Patreon. I have a couple big videos slated for the rest of this week, and those are going to be exclusive. I have several months of lag before I start to let those trickle out into the YouTube sphere. If you want any questions answered or turned into videos, that is where I give priority. That is where I give the most attention to people. So I set that up as a way for you guys to get easier access to me. So go ahead and check out the Patreon. Thank you for your support. Okay, getting into this one. I've made videos like this before, and it's a topic I like to talk about because that's actually what inspired me to make this channel in the first place. It was dealing with all of the people that I have direct influence with as far as coaching or just giving general training advice, gym members. I'm always revisiting what my process was, where I started, and the things that I struggled with, because that's what I try to emphasize when I'm communicating to people when they're struggling with some issue or some concept, because I have a lot of direct experience struggling with the same concept. So I do like to talk about kind of newbie problems, because they're pretty universal. You tend to see a lot of the same gaps in knowledge or understanding. And a big part of that is that we have this general pop training culture that has a lot of information thrown out all over the place. There's magazines, and now there's social media and YouTube channels, and you have, this expert over here who maybe has a PhD, and he's trying to say, well, you should be doing this because this is what the literature says. Then over here you have the coach who's trained dozens of world champions who said this is what you should do because this is what works. And you're constantly trying to reconcile all these different bits of information. And then in the middle, you have the people that don't know their ass from the hole in the ground, but because they're charismatic and, make good videos, they get a foothold in the arena and they're able to peddle their nonsense, and, they'll take some of the pie. So there's always a risk that no matter who you're looking at, the person might be full of shit to begin with. So it's rife with pitfalls, and the biggest problem is that there is not a set hierarchy. It's not like, I relate this to MMA a lot. It's like, what would MMA be like if there weren't set hierarchies, if different schools of thought didn't have established hierarchies where the people who are experienced, the masters, ran the classes, and when you start at the bottom. You're at the bottom. They give you a white belt to let you know you're at the bottom. And those people are forbidden from going around and themselves teaching the class. And that selects for best practices. You have to earn your way, you have to earn your stripes. So it can get very confusing, stuff can get very convoluted. So I feel for the newbies. It's this kind of galaxy of space debris and random information and conflicting ideas, and it's very hard to navigate. So that contributes to a lot of the problems. So the things that I focus on are foundational. They're the things that are not up for negotiation. There's plenty of stuff that's either arbitrary or personal preference, and we'll cover that. But the things I wish I knew, these are the things that are absolutely foundational. Not abiding by these messed me up pretty well, or at the very least cost me a lot of potential progress. So getting into that, the biggest one, and a lot of this is going to come down to just training organization, but the biggest one is probably managing fatigue, learning how to manage fatigue. Now, if you're new, and if you've ever gotten into the Starting Strength universe, read Practical Programming, or even covered any of the videos I've done on those, you know that there is a phenomenon where as you get stronger and more advanced as a lifter, it's actually harder for you to recover from hard efforts. And this is something that is not intuitive. It's something that you have to experience or have explained to you before you really understand it. And this is definitely something I wish I knew. You would think that as you become a more advanced athlete or more conditioned to training, that you could handle more and more and more, but it's actually the opposite. As you start to become more efficient, you can redline your abilities more relative to what your body can handle. So more advanced lifters are capable of pushing harder. They're actually developed enough, strong enough to take it to that level, and that represents a bigger systemic hit that takes a lot more time and energy and resources to recover from. So when you're newer and you start getting those newbie gains and you're using training as like a form of self-harm, you're working through all your issues. I mean, I was in high school, pimply face, all that teenage angst, and I had nothing to do but just go spend hours and hours in the gym. I wasn't going to parties. I was going to 24-hour fitness at 11 o'clock at night and just working through my stuff. So because you're new and because you're undeveloped and undertrained, and if you're, in my case, if you're a teenager, you can take this huge beating on your body and you'll still grow, you'll still adapt. But there is a clear ceiling where that becomes very unsustainable and you don't know when it's going to come. And it's usually something you realize because you've had weeks or months of stagnation, or if you're stubborn, maybe years of stagnation. And that's how you end up with those guys that have been training in the pit at 24-hour fitness for 20 years, doing the same workouts the same way and not getting any stronger. So managing fatigue is the big one. I wish I knew that there was more to training than just going in and breaking yourself against more weight, more reps, more sets, and that there was actually kind of an ebb and flow to training, and that I should plan my biggest workouts when I was the most recovered and I had the most to give, and I should recognize when I didn't have a lot that day so I could dial it back and recover. Some workouts are meant to tear you down. Some workouts are meant to just get some extra work in and allow recovery. There's differences. It's not just more. And that's something that was not self-evident. It was not intuitive. The next thing that's kind of related to that, and this is something I've harped on before, if you've been doing this for more than a day and you've watched a handful of videos, inevitably you've come across some resource that's going to tell you, stop maxing out all the time. This goes with the dynamic between being new and young and thinking you can do everything, and then trying to justify it by saying, well, this is the most sport-specific thing I could do. You know, if I want to get stronger, I need to lift heavy weights, so I should lift the heaviest weights I can all the time. And the maximum effort load, specifically maximum effort at very low reps, you know, heavy triples, doubles, singles, as hard as you can go, turning into like forced reps and your buddy like yanking the weight off your chest while you convince yourself that you hit a 50-pound PR out of nowhere. That type of stuff is not sustainable. And even if you're stubborn and you just put your head down and you barrel through it and you do find a way to kind of eke out adaptation, even though you're constantly fatigued and shooting yourself in the foot, it is something that's going to lead to frustration when you do get stagnant, and it is something that's going to be likely to lead to overuse issues. You can't just beat your tendons and joints down with as much weight as they can handle over and over and over. Some people are durable and can get away with that. It's not likely that you're that person. So you don't want to put all your eggs in the basket that assumes that you're superhuman, because you're probably not, right? So instead of getting to the point where you do beat yourself into the ground, understand that wear is a thing. Overuse issues are a thing, and you want to avoid that if you can at all costs. There is no lesson to be learned from that. That's just something that's going to set you back and frustrate you. And it goes back to managing fatigue, because max effort attempts with the same lift week in, week out do in fact lead to a neurological regression. And whatever long-term adaptation you might get by that approach is going to be punctuated by wild swings in performance. It is not predictable, it's not sustainable, and it has a history of eating up lifters. So not the smartest way to do it. Don't max out that often. You have to know how to make lighter weight work for you. You have to know how to make sub-maximal volume work for you. And it was when I got those realizations, it was when I figured out how to do that, that I was actually complete, not just as a lifter, but as a coach, as somebody who could manage other people's training. So that's a big one. And this goes into thing 3, learning that I'm not invincible. And maxing out regularly, fatigue management is related to this. You have to stay in one piece. And when you are new and you just start chipping away and realizing that you get stronger and stronger and stronger, it's easy to convince yourself that that's what training is. It's just, if I work harder and harder each time, I'm going to continue to get stronger. And that's true to a point, but eventually issues set in. It's like a car driving on an off-road path. The more often you do it, the more likely you are to get a flat. It comes with the territory. But if you can avoid unnecessary flats, your trip's going to go a lot better. That's in your best interest. Injuries do happen. They are, for the most part, inevitable if you are training for performance. It's something that you have to count for and deal with, and it's up to you to try and mitigate those. I'm actually going to do a video on all of the injuries I've had that showed me in no uncertain terms that I am, in fact, not invincible. If you started young and you've been doing this long enough, you know that the difference between 16 and 21 is huge. And the difference from 21 to 28 is huge. And the difference from 28 to 32 is huge. As you get older, as you start to accumulate wear, as you start to accumulate old injuries, you're just like a lint roller going through the years, picking up these odd injuries, you will find that your training has to account for preventing injuries, working around the ones you have, keeping yourself in one piece. That's a hard thing to do. It's not straightforward. And when you're young, you're full of piss and vinegar, it's easy to convince yourself that's not a thing. It is a thing, okay? So be mindful. If you want to get as strong as possible, you have to last long enough to train long enough to get strong in the first place. So keep that in mind. Another thing I wish I knew from back in the day, the importance of moving well. This doesn't just mean technique with the lifts, though it definitely does. You don't just default to what's ever comfortable the first time you move a barbell. You have to pay attention to your setup, to your cues. You have to be kinesthetic. You have to be aware of what's moving when, and you have to pay attention, make adjustments accordingly. So there's some trial and error with that, but you do have to pay attention to technique. But I mean generally moving well, as far as maintaining some semblance of mobility. You don't have to put Supple Leopard on your nightstand and read it every night before you go to bed. You don't have to spend 45 minutes of mobility work before every workout. You do have to do something that promotes good movement ability. Yes, that probably fucking includes stretching. I don't want to hear it from anybody that thinks stretching is overrated or overblown, because those people are speaking from their own experience where they happen to not have any issues. If you train an aggregate of people, if you cover a population of people, there are going to be a lot of people within that population who do get bound, who do get movement dysfunction, who do develop asymmetries, and all of those things will express themselves with some sort of overuse issue down the road, or some poor positioning that predisposes you, best case scenario, to just not performing as well as you could because you're not as efficient and well-rounded as you should be. Worst case scenario is something that forces you into a shitty position, which leads to an injury. And I've had both of those be true. So over a long period of time, growing muscle in the absence of good movement habits and patterns, the tendency is for you to get bound. This happened to me. The first thing that grew on me were my shoulders and my lats. I did a lot of overhead pressing, a lot of rowing. My shoulders and lats exploded. So this is when, I'm 16, 17, 18, getting my first signs of imaginary lat syndrome because my arms are stuck out to the side. But I realized eventually I had a hard time getting the bar below my chin when I would do overhead presses. I realized I had a hard time locking out because my lats were so tight. It was hard to get my head through. Nothing I did promoted that specific type of movement requirement. And if you don't do anything that requires a certain amount of movement, eventually, as you get more muscle and as you get more bound, you're not going to be able to accommodate those movements. You have to do that specifically if you want to maintain it. Again, there's some people that may not need it. There's some people that may be fine if they just do the bare minimum. Don't assume you're that person, because by the time you realize you're not that person, it will be too late and you have to work twice as hard to take those steps back. There's nobody ever lost gains from 20 minutes of basic maintenance, rolling, stretching, trying to accommodate just a basic useful range of motion. Nobody ever lost gains for that. Some of the strongest human beings in the world were very flexible. They just have to spend time on it. I remember you have bodybuilders. I remember Martin Muir, he was a strong man. He won the Conan's wheel and then did a full splits. So Olympic lifters, you want to talk about pound for pound strength, gymnasts are extraordinarily strong, also extremely flexible. You guys know Martins Licis. He has amazing, for a guy that's as big and as strong as he is, he has amazing mobility, great hip mobility. He can squat super deep, super active, flexible shoulders. He can accommodate a full rack position. And he routinely beats guys like Shaw and Thor at feats of strength. Whatever study you read that says stretching saps strength, you're talking about a long, deep stretch done immediately before a max lift. Yeah, if you're going to max your deadlift, don't spend 20 minutes stretching out your hamstrings. But as far as maintenance goes, yes, these are things you need to know how to do unless you just want to be a rusted out human forklift, right? If you want to be the toe mater of lifting, I guess go right ahead. You get all the scar tissue and bound muscle to create as much artificial compression as you possibly can get. Let's see what that does for your quality of life and for your injury risk as time goes on. It's not going to go well. Moving well, I wish I would have learned that earlier. My technique would be better. I'd be able to do more. So those are really the big ones as far as what I wish I knew. It really has to do with managing training fatigue, maintaining mobility, things that not only optimize what you get out of your training, but prevent bad shit from happening. That's really what shot me in the foot. And that's evident by all the injuries I got early on. And they were all rooted in not moving well, not having good technique, kinesthetic awareness, and not managing my training efforts. And that led to the first injury I ever got was a low back injury deadlifting. I was like 16. And that led to a dozen others. And I mean concrete injuries where in the middle of a lift, something pops and then I'm out for 6 weeks. I mean really big injuries that sidelined my training, made it difficult not just to lift, but difficult to live. And it led to this sense of like, why am I doing this if it's going to keep tearing me down? It's led to labrum tears and rotator cuff tears in my shoulders. It's led to intense hip pain, greater trochanteric pain in my hips. It's led to strained patellar tendons that still give me problems. it's only been the last 5 years or so, and it's no doubt that this is why my performance is better now, even though I'm getting into my mid 30s. My performance is better now than it's ever been. It's because I'm finally able to keep myself in one piece, manage my training, and things are going the way they should have gone all along. And if I would have compounded this with those wonderful teenage hormones, I probably would be light years ahead of where I am now. But hey, this is part of the journey, it's part of the learning experience. So this is my short list of things I wish I knew. Pay attention to fatigue. Make sure you have a sense of what your training organization is like and why it is that way, and do what you can to stay healthy. That's really about it. Next video I'm going to do is going to cover the things that I did do right, because thankfully for me, there were some things in that list that set me up for success. So I'll go over that next. Any questions you have, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.